Hello and welcome back. And we're in the middle of several videos on near and dear to my heart about education, public schools. And this one we're going to be talking about how we can improve public schools. Not a big topic, but we'll delve into that or some ideas in this video. Another big topic, and we want to first look at what public schools were designed to do, how they're structured. So, what are they doing well, and maybe even some of the weaknesses of the structure. Why don't we talking about the size of public schools from the elementary, middle, right up through high school? So, we'll have a conversation about that. And then we want to be looking about what some steps are that we can take. That and more is what we'll be covering in this video. So when we think about public schools and the way they were set up and structured, what they did well, what they were designed to do, would teach some of the basic thinking skills that you needed. Literacy skills, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? The three R's. You can also talk about the triumvirate, which was grammar, logic, and then rhetoric. Those were how public schools were designed to teach those skills. Those skills were all about being able to think. So when you could think, you could solve problems. If we go back to like the colonial days and all, by the time you were like in eighth grade, right, that equivalent, you were either ready to go learn a trade or you were ready to go to university, depending on which track you were more suited for. Nowadays, we've got high schools, and one thing that high schools have begun to do and offer, I think we've lost some of this at the middle school level, but some of the things like wood shop, right, which used to be back in the day, we've got away from some of those hands-on skills, trade-oriented skills. Now we do have vocational schools, high schools, all over the place, which begin to teach some of those trades. So that's something that high schools still do offer, and they're kind of doing well. We're having more and more variety of courses being available, so that's something they do well. But again, under its original idea and structure, somewhere within the last 30 or 40 years, if you look at our test scores and all, we've kind of lost some of what we were doing well, those basic thinking skills and problem solving and certain essential knowledge. That is what people are getting concerned about because test scores and other indicators say we aren't doing that well anymore. One of the great challenges that we have today is this movement towards consolidation. And the idea is it's to save money. But bigger schools are not generally better. There's a whole lot to say about the smaller schools, especially at the elementary school level, but even up to the high school level, and the ability to develop relationships, which is foundationally one of the most important things in developing the success of students is to have that stronger relationships, peer to peer and student to teacher. In larger schools, behaviors, problems increase, stress levels increase, and you can't perform as well when you are under the emotion of stress. Teacher burnout increases. So I got to share a story of a district that I know of that had a really nice campus, right? It's a suburban, affluent community. They had a high school, middle school. There's plenty of land in between to build a new elementary school, to combine two elementary schools that they had. They spent $40 million on this beautiful new building. State of the art. Everything's perfect. It's like wonderful. Everything's all on one campus now. Well, as they bring all the students in, they had spent several years struggling with increasing levels of behavior, stress, deteriorating performance by students, and increasing levels of stress on staff and burnout. It's too big for young kids. It's the bottom line. They would have been much better served, in the humble opinion of this expert, that they would have been better served by spending maybe $2 million on $5 million, or 5 different neighborhood elementary schools, or even $5 million on 5 different neighborhood elementary schools. They would have saved money and had a much better, smaller environment to improve things for their kids. It's just what we just talked about with the size of schools, especially true elementary school, but that doesn't go away with middle and high school. And in my state, in many states, there's been a movement to consolidate and create regional high school to save money. And I remember even asking a professor of mine when I was working on my master's degree in education, who was a school board member in a rural community in my state. And I asked him this very question. He goes, the biggest mistake of his career was advocating for consolidation. He said, we lose when we do that sense of community, and the schools don't improve. Now, there's a great movie out there. I'm a baseball guy. I love baseball. But there's a great movie, the final season, about Norway, Iowa, which had a legendary baseball program, small farming community. And this was like their pride, right? Their baseball team was their pride. They had this tremendous tradition, winning state championships and always being one of the top teams, even though they were a really small town, rural community. Well, consolidation was going to happen, and they were going to be merged with another high school, combine these communities, and the final season, that's what the movie's about, their final season, because they aren't going to have one the next year, and that baseball team and that pride and all that. Those stories are true. They've happened all over the country, and we need to think second about this move towards consolidation. We've got to ask ourselves, does it really need to save us money? There's some real good questions we should be asking ourselves about all that. One of these questions is, if we begin to think about the structure of schools, right? You have school boards. So the idea was, as when public school comes in, we need to have somebody governing schools, right? So as communities grew, it went from the one-room schoolhouse where the parents got together, and the town meetings, we hire a teacher comes in, they teach all those students. If you think of pioneering kind of schools. And as schools begin to grow in those communities, they need somebody to govern that, right? So, and we want the parents to have control. So the idea is that you're going to have a school board, and they can elect people, and the school board member is supposed to represent the parents so that they still have that control. Well, if we think about it in this terms, let's say you are a young couple like we were, and you're checking out the schools in the neighborhoods that you want, and like, oh, that's a good school, there's a great neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. So you buy your house. You're now there. Well, schools are only as good as the leadership. And if leadership begins to change, whether it's at the building level or even at the superintendent level, it can begin to change the culture of the schools. And what was a good school maybe when you moved in, by the time your kid's there, or maybe your youngest child, has changed, and maybe it's not so good, but you're kind of locked in. So you can vote for a school board member, but that's one member from your little neighborhood or district out of several. And if your little part of that school district is the only one really having problems, too bad for you, right? You don't have any real control over what's being taught or what's being done or the administrative use of it. You don't have any say. This is where voucher systems are coming in. This is why parents are beginning to advocate for vouchers, where money follows the student, right? That's one alternative for helping put more control back into the families and the parents. There are other issues, though, with this idea of consolidation, and community and athletics are huge. Athletics have been such a huge part of high schools and even middle schools, such a huge part of the community that there's a lot that we need to think about how to keep that good aspect, but yet make high schools smaller along with middle schools. We've just wrapped up another video. I hope you had some ideas, at least spur the conversation, spur the thinking. As always, please consider subscribing to my channel and check out the other videos, but you also might want to consider registering for one of my free webinars. In particular, you might want to register for the webinar Empower and Excel, and the link to that will be found in the description.